This first Thursday series I think, one of my favorite programs that we do because it reaches so many people and is so accessible. I couldn't be more pleased to have Russ on tonight. Russ Kramer not only is a fantastic artist, award-winning artist known for large-scale depictions of dramatic scenes of the sea, uh, particular scenes from some of history's greatest yacht races. He's also a fellow and past president of the American Society of Marine Artists. He's also a longtime supporter of the National Maritime Historical Society. We couldn't be more pleased to have him here tonight, especially because of the work that he's going to be talking about. I hope you all have gotten your most recent issue of Sea History um, with our cover this past spring, which features Russ's work. I have to say it's one of my favorite covers that we've ever done. So without further ado, I'm going to turn this over to Russ. If you have questions, please put them in the chat and I'll monitor those as we go along, and we'll be able to bring those up at the end of the talk. So again, Russ, thank you for being with us tonight.
Well, I'm delighted to be here. Thank you very much. Shall I start sharing my screen?
Lovely.
Okay, let me see. Um, yes, I'm going to share this, and I am going to share this. Can everybody see that?
Excellent. Yep, that looks great.
Okay. Well, thank you to Cathy and all of the crew at the National Maritime Historical Society. I have been a longtime supporter and a bigger fan, and their mission is to celebrate and illuminate maritime history, two of my favorite things. And shout out to all of their crew, Heather, Deidre, Wendy, Susan, and all the good folks over there. If you are coming to the NMHS for the first time, because of this, I do encourage you to contribute. They do great work. They publish a beautiful magazine, and I'm very happy to have been on the cover for this issue. If you do make a donation to be here, and I'm hoping that you won't demand a refund at the end of this speech. So, and we're all missing Jeopardy. So it better be good. Anyway, I'm thrilled and delighted to share with you my journey to create this work of art, which is now on permanent display in the Massachusetts State House, commemorating the birthplace of the U.S. Coast Guard. And I am going to talk about the research that I did into this painting, some of the really interesting facts and history that I uncovered on the three original organizations birthed in the Commonwealth that eventually merged into the modern Coast Guard. And then I'll talk some about my artistic journey, my research, sketching, model posing, and finally the actual painting of it and the installation and the dedication. So this is it. It is actually 8 feet by 8.5 feet, and it's up above eye level. So it really does look imposing, and I'm so proud of the very prominent spot that it's taking in the State House. Let me see why. Okay, so this is a better image of the mural itself. And this is an imaginary scene that takes place outside of Boston Harbor, looking west. And it takes place in three different times. These three different elements are shown at different times in history. So we're doing a little bit of Spielbergian time travel here. My advance is not working, so I'll do it this way. The first of the three elements in this mural is a surfboat and crew out of the Hull station. And this is depicted in the late 1840s. The Humane Society of Massachusetts had nothing, still has nothing to do with animals. It was founded in order to save lives, essentially. And eventually, the Humane Society would be merged into the U.S. Life Saving Service in 1878. I'll go into some deeper history on each of these elements. Secondly, is the Revenue Cutter Massachusetts, which was built in Newburyport in 1790 at the directive of Alexander Hamilton, who was Treasury Secretary, and he he obviously knew that the young nation needed to create more revenue to pay off debts from the Revolutionary War. And so he ordered the building of first one and then a fleet of these revenue cutters to collect tariffs on goods coming in and out of the United States. She was retired after only 1 year in the service. The Revenue Cutter Service merged with the U.S. Life Saving Service in 1915, forming the modern Coast Guard. Lastly is the Boston Light. This was the first lighthouse in the colonies. It didn't look like that when it was originally lit in 1716. It was kind of an unimpressive pile of rocks with a wood fire on top on Little Brewster Island in the mouth of Boston Harbor. But I decided to depict her in her 1859 configuration, which I'll talk about more. In 1910, it would fall under the umbrella of the Lighthouse Service, the U.S. Lighthouse Service, and eventually finally merging into the U.S. Coast Guard in 1939. So how did this project start? So I got a letter out of the blue from the Massachusetts State House Coast Guard Memorial Committee in February of 2024. And they were putting out a request for an original work of maritime art, which was sent to about a dozen leading maritime artists. And I read this letter and I thought to myself, yeah, I want to do that. So this effort actually dates back to the year 2000 when legislation was passed to create a memorial in the State House to the Coast Guard. And it was the only branch of service that was not memorialized in the State House, despite the fact that all of the organizations that merged into the modern Coast Guard were founded in the Commonwealth. So the first thing I did was get in my car and drive to Boston and check out the State House. I'd never been to the Massachusetts State House, which holds a prominent place on the top of Beacon Hill in Boston. And it is just chock full of large scale, really impressive, dramatic, moving pieces of art commemorating history. And I tell you, I was just genuinely inspired by seeing all of that and a little bit intimidated too, I think. I've always been a fan of this kind of work, these large scale, heroic paintings that depict people doing dramatic, amazing things in narrative artworks like this. This is probably the most famous American painting of this description. This is Emanuel Lutz's Washington Crossing the Delaware, which is just monumental in scale and drama at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. And this holds special meaning to me. These are Jose Maria Cert murals. These are in the lobby of Rockefeller Center in New York. Now, when I was a kid, I grew up in New York, and my dad's office was in Rockefeller Center. And at the age of 10, 11, 12, I was already a little budding artist. And occasionally I would come visit my dad at work and I would see these murals. And I was just so astounded by them. First of all, I didn't know you could paint that big. Uh, and it really struck me from a very early age. I think this is a celebration of capitalism, essentially, to appease Mr. Rockefeller, who was paying the bills, and that's fine. Capitalism is good, needless to say. Also notice that these are monochromatic without the use of color, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. And then here, when I toured the State House, we found the blank wall where soon there would be a mural to the origins of the Coast Guard. This is in a very prominent space. It's right off second floor elevator landing, just off the Hall of Flags. So I responded to their requests to express interest, needless to say, and along with a resume and some samples of my work and some references, they asked for kind of my loose vision for this painting. And here's what I said. I said, in short, the painting I envision would have a strong central humanist theme in the same genre as the heroic murals elsewhere in the State House. Each of those exceptional works puts the figure or figures foremost. The viewer feels a sense of the courage or nobility of the individuals or groups depicted. The composition within the square format would build vertically, enforcing and enhancing the sense of striving and achievement. The palette choices would be subdued and the technique and the composition classical, as though the mural joined the others in the State House, not in 2025, but a century earlier. And this is what I love to do. I love to paint people in historic maritime settings. I thoroughly researched these paintings. Most of them have been concentrated mostly on yachting history and America's Cup races, but I build models and I pose people in costume. And these aren't based on photographs. They're based on my research and my sense of traveling back through time and bringing you along on the journey. And the creation of these paintings is a tremendous joy for me. Everything I learn and everything that I could put into these paintings is really something that makes me very, very happy. This is my most recent painting called Miss New York, which is a little off subject. This is on board a Staten Island ferry in the late 1940s. So then there was the committee reduced the number of artists down to 4 or 6 and invited those of us in a kind of a stage 2 response to put together a more formal proposal as a response to a request for proposal. Budget, logistics, timeline, specifications, all of that. And they invited us to offer up sketches or concepts if we chose. And the committee was explicit. They said no modern references and no recognizable people. So the first thing I did was to completely ignore their directives. And I gave them a few different choices. This is a concept. Thought to myself, well, how can you have a heroic painting without heroes in it? So this was one of my concepts, which sort of juxtaposes the modern Coast Guard heroes with those of the past. And I still love this concept, and I'm hoping maybe it'll find a home, maybe in the brand new National Coast Guard Museum, which is being built right down the street from me. Or if you have a blank wall in your living room and you want an 8-foot Coast Guard mural, please reach out to me. This was another concept that was more in line with what they were looking for, the 3 elements in one imagined scene, but this is a little sedate. I just wanted to show them something that might have been along the lines of what they were looking for. And then this is a third one that I did, which took these 3 elements here in sort of a triptych. And they seem to really like the action in the surfboat with the crew rescuing somebody from the sea, as I did. So this was sort of a concept that won some praise and was eventually the idea of combining those 3 into one. Well, in October 24, I was just over the moon and thrilled to have been selected for this project, greatly honored. And I'm very grateful to the Massachusetts State House Memorial Committee for entrusting me with this incredible challenge. And so the work began. And like every one of my paintings of this nature, it just started with deep research. I just put my hands on everything I could read about the early history of the Coast Guard and the three original organizations, read as much as I could, talked to a lot of experts. I visited the Hull Lifesaving Museum, which is a gem, the Custom House Museum in Newburyport, the Coast Guard Academy, and started to collect a lot of the information that I would need to educate myself on these three organizations. I kept copious notes, jotting down things that I thought would be important to me, little sketches and different things that occurred to me that I might be able to incorporate into the painting. And some sketches. This is a couple of small scale pages of very scribbled little sketches. This is actually the first one that bears any resemblance to what the mural looked like. This is about 3 inches square. It took me about 15 seconds to do. And it's just very gestural, but it was my own sort of developmental way of envisioning the early stages of the concept that I would present. So I'll go a little bit more into each of these three organizations and tell you some about what I learned during my research. This is all about the Cutter, Massachusetts. Now, the Cutter, Massachusetts was, as I said, built at the behest of wait, that's not Alexander Hamilton. There, that's Alexander Hamilton. So Alexander Hamilton was the Treasury Secretary under George Washington, and he desired to raise revenue through collecting tariffs on shipping to help pay debts from the Revolutionary War. And he lays out the specifics for the building of a revenue cutter in a bill to Congress. He says boats from 36 to 40 feet keel will answer the purpose, each having one captain, one lieutenant, and 6 mariners, and armed with swivel guns. Now, later, Hamilton will instruct the collector of customs, who was his agent in Boston, that the revenue boat for the coast of Massachusetts, quote, should be of such a size as to be able to stand the trials incidental to Eastern navigation, and instruct you to agree with some person or persons in the state of Massachusetts for the building and fitting of a good cutter of such size as, in the opinion of experienced pilots, commanders of vessels and merchants, is deemed necessary to enable her to keep your coast in the winter season. So Hamilton's agent, customs collector Benjamin Lincoln, that actually is a picture of Benjamin Lincoln, who went on to a storied career on the stage. Actually, I don't have a picture of Benjamin Lincoln, but that's close enough. Anyway, he was overseeing the build, and he describes the newly launched Massachusetts to Hamilton. She has one deck, 2 masts. Her length is 50 feet above her upper deck. Her depth is 7 feet 8 inches, breadth 17 feet 8 inches. She measures 70 and 43/95 tons. If you can imagine that. She is a square stern schooner, has quarter badge, and an Indian's head for figurehead. She has a long quarter deck and a deep waist. This is a mural that adorns the Coast Guard Academy in what I think is the old library. And there's a wonderful series of WPA murals. This one depicts the building of the first cutter, Massachusetts, in Newburyport. Well, late 18th century shipyards in the new country did a lot of improvising, and they built ships more on instincts than plans. And after a final inspection in Newbury Shipyard, Lincoln was like, whoa, this isn't what we were talking about. And he reports back to Hamilton. You will observe the cutter is much larger than I contracted her to have her. This is caused by her being much deeper than is mentioned in the contract. Hence, the vessel is much bigger than what was expected or wished for and is bigger than needed, making her 17 tons overbuilt. Now, no plans for her existed or were lost in the Great Fire, and every depiction of her varies a little bit. So here are a few images of a couple of renderings and a model that's in the Newburyport Museum. This is the one that I thought was probably most accurate because having read the narrative of her build, this one shows a topsail schooner, which seems to credibly meet a number of the details as laid out in the descriptions of her. This was done in the 90s by Dr. John Tilley, who did some of his own research. And so this is going to be the basis for my rendering of the cutter, Massachusetts. I want to thank committee member Bob Pokris for his knowledge and guidance on the Massachusetts. So this is my first sketch of the Massachusetts, and this is of her from the stern. And Lincoln was right. In the end, she was overbuilt. She was slow, unsuited to the task, and replaced within a year. But this is the original Massachusetts one, which was retired over a year in service. I also wanted to depict her from the stern, knowing that the major action was going to be the surf crew in the foreground, and I didn't want to show her from the bow so that there might be some confusion that she was coming to the rescue 50 years into the future. This is all about the Boston Light, which is depicted in my mural in 1856. So I want to thank Sally Snowman. Sally was the last keeper of the Boston Light before it was fully automated. I'm not sure what year that was. It wasn't that long ago. And she did exhaustive research into the history and published a book called A Historical Perspective. If you look at the image on the right, you can see Sally up there in her 19th century garb, out walking the catwalk. And this is also the same view from the east that I used in the mural. And you can see the skyline of Boston in the background. So I imagine seeing the State House, which was the most prominent building at that time. Now, the light is on an island called Little Brewster Island, which is out at the mouth of Boston Harbor. You can see it in the little circle on the right, and Boston up there is on the left. And this is a chart from 1706, which actually predates the 1716 establishment of the light. And yet on this chart, Little Brewster Island is instead called Beacon Isle. So I think there probably was some sort of light there at the time. The light started as a 60-foot rubble stone tower. It was soon replaced by whale or herring oil lanterns. It was held by British forces during the Revolutionary War and attacked by and burned by American forces twice, destroyed by the British in 1776, rebuilt in 1783, enlarged to 98 feet in 1856, and fitted with a second-order Fresnel lens. Now, Fresnel lenses were new technology, and they were an incredibly inventive bit of mid-19th century technology that through a series of prisms was able to kind of create a beam of light, much magnified out of a single light source. And this is my first sketch of the Boston Light. And there's my little sketch of the Boston skyline, which is going to be in the background of my imaginary scene. Now, this is all about the surfboats and crews from the Humane Society of Massachusetts, depicted in the late 1840s. The Humane Society was formed with the desire to foster the study and practice of saving lives, particularly drowning victims. They started with huts out on the Cape. Many of you who go out to the Cape are familiar with these little huts, which most of them are long gone, but they were basically passive. They were equipped with blankets and water, no people, just sort of goods and different items that a shipwreck victim might need. They were unfortunately, they were routinely neglected, vandalized, or pilfered for supplies. And then in 1801, the Humane Society became more proactive, um, building lifeboats. The first one was 1807 in Cohasset, although that effort didn't get off the ground. Finally, in 1842, the Massachusetts legislature funded 16 manned lifeboat stations to be built along the treacherous coast. Here's an original list of the 19 stations. I'm not sure exactly what year this is, probably close to 1850. And you can see Hull, misspelled there on my slide. Sorry about that. It's on Stony Beach in Hull. The director, the keeper was Joseph Goff. They had mortar and old boat and floats. This is a typical life saving station along the Massachusetts coast. This is later after, obviously, photography. So this would be later in the 1800s. This one is on Monomoy. And I want to thank Captain Tim Drain, who is the world's foremost expert on mid 19th century surfboats. And it was really exciting for me to talk to somebody so knowledgeable about this. You can see some of this original plans and notes that he was able to uncover from that period that shows these boats equipped with air chambers in the bow and stern to help buoyancy, as well as these cork or air-filled bladders or fenders, which you can see under the gunnels of these boats that appear in my mural as well. Most of these boats were built on basic lapstrake whaleboat construction. They were all built by different yards. There wasn't really anything that was uniform about them. But they were also came in different sizes. This is a surfboat Nantasket, which survives to this day. This was built many decades later than the 1840s, but the design didn't change that much. And so it was really useful for me to go to the Hull Lifesaving Museum and view the Nantasket. Also discovered her livery of green and white. And you can see also, obviously, the bladder, cork-filled bladder, that helped with buoyancy. Thank you to Maureen Gillis, my friend DJ, and all the helpful folks there at the Hull Museum. So this is my first sketch of an 8-man, 26-foot, 1840s surfboat that would have likely been in service in Hull. Now, I did a lot of research into the crews. There were various crews depending on the size of the boat, from 6 men to 8 or 10. Hull had a 26-foot boat. There was a coxswain and 6 rowers and 1 spotter possible in my 8-man crew. And they had no formalized uniforms at this time. Later they would. But it was sort of come as you are, different hats, sweaters, coats. There were possible oilskins and nor'easters. One thing that was issued to everybody, though, were cork-filled life vests for all the crew. And I just started collecting inspiration anywhere I could find, guys who looked like they were salty, life-saving folks from sort of that period. I also started collecting anything I could find on wonderful old paintings or etchings of life-saving boats. And this is really interesting. I discovered this, what I think is a life-size recreation of a surfboat and a crew. This is in the graveyard of the Atlantic Museum in the Outer Banks of North Carolina. Now, I collected hundreds, I mean, literally hundreds of old photos. This is one I found, again, in the Hull Museum. And this one struck me. I was really interested in this because it showed a lot of the gear that might have been employed on these boats during that time. And I particularly landed on this. This is it went off over my head like a whale oil lantern. And it occurred to me that I could use this device in the painting as a dramatic lighting effect and an emotional center for the work. So I started sketching my surfboat crew. I started really with dozens of these little thumbnail sketches of guys in different poses. who would be rowing, throwing life rings, the coxswain. And eventually I picked a number of them that I thought were best to create the kind of actors on my stage that were all working together, not only in reality in this imagined scene to rescue, but to support each of the others in a dramatic composition. So I began to place these little thumbnail sketches of my uh, crew members into this lifeboat, and there are 8 of them all together. So this is really my first kind of sketch where I was happy with the way all of the figures were integrating. Then I incorporated the other 2 sketches that I had already prepared of the Massachusetts and the light, added some wreckage there in the foreground for visual interest, and I'm beginning to create this scene. I also thought it was very important and lobbied very hard for a labeling device at the top of this painting. I wanted it to be clear from the beginning that this was about the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, birthplace of the Coast Guard. I wanted people to look at this painting and not wonder what it was about or to have to read the little plaque underneath. So I began to toy with some effect like that. Now, this composition to me, and like a lot of the work I strive to do, is interesting compositionally because there are only a couple of there's only one horizontal and one vertical line. The rest of it is a complicated but complementary use of crossed diagonals. And then I started to think about values with my light source. So the next stage, once I have my sketches, is to photograph a live model following the positions that I want them in. And I'm going to show you this because this is really interesting. This is Joshua James, who is the greatest lifesaver of all time, who lived during or a little later than this period. Now, he was credited with 500 rescues over a 60-year career, and his uniform, which you can see there, is in the collection of the Hull Lifesaving Museum, and it's tiny. I think that it would be snug on a 12-year-old ballerina. So people were little back then. And I thought, well, I'll just get kind of a normal sized model. Where can I find a suitable, handsome, young, athletic, lithe model to pose for my painting? And it turns out, of course, that the U.S. Coast Guard Academy is 10 minutes from my house. I reached out to my committee, which is full of old, salty Coast Guard historians and retirees. And I said, does anybody have a recommendation for a model that I can use? And in fact, yes, this is how we met First Class Cadet Nate Pokris, who is the grandson of Bob Pokris on the committee. Now, Nate has since graduated and gone on to become Ensign Pokris, but he was also captain of the crew team, which is also a wonderful synergy. But if you know anything about captains of crew teams, Nate is 6 feet and 200 pounds of barrel chested muscle who could have crushed poor Captain James with in one hand if he wished. But Nate was just a wonderful, spirited victim of my insisting that he move this way, that way. We hosted him in my backyard for the photo session. We fed him pizza. We fed him a lot of pizza. And he and his buddy came along, and they just could not have been more accommodating. I put a fake mustache on him, different hats, different sweaters, and so forth. So using that photography, now I am able to composite kind of an all-Nate Photoshop of the surfboat crew, which is really just a good starting point for me then to modify these photographs, to use them as a starting point to move different things around to create a more finished, uh, different composition, a master drawing. And of course, I needed people in the water. So I asked my friends Jeff and Val, who live in my neighborhood and are good friends, and they have a hot tub, if they would be interested in posing. And of course, they were. So there's Jeff and Val who are being rescued. And my friend John, whose only contribution to the painting is his right arm. So, with all that, now I have a master drawing of my surfboat and crew. And from there, I can do a value study. So, remembering back to the Rockefeller Center monochromatic murals that I showed you, I was of and am of the opinion that the values, especially in this painting, were going to be critical. So I started with a value study. This is 32 by 30, which is about a quarter of the size of the finished painting. And then I added color to it. So this was my final color study. It's about a quarter of the size of the actual painting that I used as a guide for the finished piece. We also did a full-size mock-up of the mural to put on the wall so that the State House Art Commission and the committee could see it in scale. And I want to thank Susan Greendyke from the State House Art Commission for all her help and guidance and assistance. And her crew helped us get that up on the wall, which was really helpful. Now, after all that, it's finally time for me to paint. So anybody who's ever been to my little studio here knows it's kind of compact, and I had no way to do it here. That photo you see on your screen is not my little studio. That is an empty storefront that I was so lucky to have access to, which is right across Main Street. And this was the old Bank Square Books. It has high ceilings, lots of workspace, parking spaces, air conditioning, a bathroom. And I can't thank my friend John Green enough from Lux Bond and Green for allowing me use in the space. This is before I got started. You can see my canvas there, getting ready to mount on the wall. And just like in the State House, it was mounted to the wall with gravity bars or French cleats, which basically are 2x4s that are cut on 45-degree angles so that the canvas basically uses gravity to rest on the mounted gravity bars on the wall. This is a little hard to look at, but what it is basically is my projected master drawing that I'm projecting onto the canvas 1/4 at a time. And from that, I'm able to follow the outlines of the drawing projected to do the master outline on the canvas. So that's what you see here. I've transferred my master drawing to the canvas. And again, just like my value study, I decided to start just with the values, the grays, black, white to gray. This is called a grisé, which is a fancy French term. And so this is an early stage of the painting. The project got some interesting local interest. I was delighted to talk to people as they were wandering by, especially a lot of Coast Guard folks. And being an old newspaper man myself, this is what we used to call color or human interest on the front page of the local New London Day. About 7 or 8 weeks later, the painting is finished, and we gave it a proper send-off from Mystic. As I talked about earlier, I was really convinced that it needed some sort of a labeling device. And during my research, I discovered this wonderful, colorful symbol, which is a Coast Guard commissioning pennant, which is very meaningful to anybody who's served in the Coast Guard on board a ship because it flies over every new ship that's commissioned by the Coast Guard. So I thought it'd be really interesting to incorporate the 13 blue stars on a white field and red and white stripes somehow into a device. These turned out to be a little fussy. And in the end, this is what I designed, which is gold on black carved This was carved by a master carver, Cameron Bortz of Mystic Carved Signs, right here, and he did a beautiful job. We also picked out a complementary frame to match both the header and the painting. And here's how we transported it to Boston. I called my friend, Admiral Mike Platt, who's the Coast Guard commandant and an accomplished Jayhawk pilot. And he brought it in by helicopter. That's not actually what happened, but he did host us, my wife and I, and the committee at a beautiful dinner party at his wonderful compound, Beverly. And it turns out the commandant has his own lighthouse. So this was a little thank you card I put together for him. In fact, we were able to move this to Boston because the backside of the stretcher was designed with these vertical aluminum braces that come apart so that it can gently fold in half. I want to thank my man Tan of Tan Stretchers in Bronx, New York, for building this for me. And here he is. He's folding it gently in half, putting it in the back of his truck for transportation to Boston. Now, painting this thing was easy compared to the 2 hours that I was following this truck nervously to Boston. But Tan knew what he was doing. We got it to Boston. He reversed the process at the State House, unfolding it, rebracing it, restretching it. And here we are with the help of a couple of.
I'm glad you mentioned that. There have been several questions about where you got that stretched and, the process of that. So, wow, that's incredible.
Yeah, it's he did a beautiful job. It is made out of the highest quality ash, I believe, with just the best quality fasteners. And this is not his first rodeo. I picked him because he was recommended to me as somebody who makes these giant canvases collapsible for major galleries and artists in Manhattan. So he did a tremendous job. It was not inexpensive, as you can imagine. But here we are getting it up on the wall and installing the header and frame in November of 2025. And a couple of weeks ago, we dedicated it. I was just so proud. There were about 150 people who showed up, the commandant, a lot of the Coast Guard crew, the lieutenant governor, the committees, my friends, family. There were speeches. I gave a much abridged version of this little presentation. And to my incredible shock, the commandant presented me with the Meritorious Public Service Award and Medal, which I am actually wearing today. Here's my medal. I hope you can all see my medal. I've worn it every day since. I wear it on the golf course. I will transfer it to my jammies before bedtime. So I'm just so thrilled and honored. And I want to thank Admiral Platt and to the entire Memorial Committee, especially my co-chairs, Captain Greg Ketchen and former state rep Ruth Provost, who were my conduit and communicators through the process, and all the members of the committee. And I'll just say the origins of the Coast Guard and the heroism and sacrifice of its members from yesterday all the way through today is an extraordinary story to tell. And I was so greatly inspired and honored by the opportunity to tell it. Finally, we do have reproductions of this available in an inexpensive poster. These are all reprinted with permission from the Massachusetts State House Art Commission. And you can see more on the story of the mural and more of my work at my website. And I'm just so happy that you came, and thank you so much. And I'm certainly happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Russ. Well, you did a pretty good job of answering questions as you went along. A lot of our questions that were submitted ahead of time about asking about your research process. You walked us through all that. And there's many people who are complimentary of your work. and how this turned out. Um,
That's so nice
how
to hear. Thank you, really, from the bottom of my heart. It was a tremendous journey, and the response to it has been so strong, especially from the folks in the Coast Guard. And I just couldn't be more pleased and honored to have had the opportunity to do it.
Well, so overall, from when you got the commission to finish, what was the timeline for that? I didn't
Yeah,
do
so
the
it was
math
really
on
about a
all
year
of
and a
it.
half.
Okay.
There from the initial response to the letter that I got, my response saying, yes, I'm definitely interested in doing this. And then few months went by, and then the formal response to proposal. So I put that all in front of them, and the elimination process. There was a lot of weeks of nervously not hearing anything more about it. So when I got the call in October of 2024, I got right to work. And in the winter, that was my period of research. In the spring, I was doing sketching and working with the committee to refine the concept. And then in the summer, I dedicated to painting first the studies and then the finished painting. So it was finished in mid October and on the wall in November.
Well, I mean, I'm glad you went into such detail with the process, and did it with humor along the way. So Ruth Provost, who I know was involved with the process,
Absolutely.
is on the call here, and she actually answered one of your questions for you. There was a question: did your client require progress sketches throughout your commission? And she said, yes, we did. So there was constant communication with the group.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
It's hard to work with an entire committee, and I've done
Yeah.
major projects like this before. And yeah, Ruth and Greg, were the co-chairs of the committee, and all the communications back and forth uh, flowed through them. And they just could not have been more delightful to work with. And there was back and forth. We worked out a lot of issues together, and it really is what it is in no small part because of their contributions and obviously their vision. Ruth was there in the year 2000 as a member of the state legislature, and she was instrumental in getting the original legislation passed way back then. So she's been on a 25-year journey to get this thing done, and big kudos to her and to Greg Ketchum.
And a lot of people have been
And by the
asking about.
way, I'll add that I'm not the only one with a meritorious service medal. The two of them were awarded one by the Commandant as well. So congratulations to my co-medal winners.
But it sounds like in your presentation you made clear this was kind of there were a lot of people along the way who helped this come together. Um,
Well, no question. And also a shout out to the other artists who were approached for this project. These were the top marine painters in the country, all of whom I know, and our colleagues and friends were all friendly. Each of them could have done an extraordinary job with this. There's no question. So I was up against some really stiff competition.
Mm. Well, a number of people have been asking about your contact information and how to reach you. Deirdre put that in the chat, russkramer.com, right?
Yep, that's it.
Yep.
And my
And
email is russ@russkramer.com.
there we go. And we'll make sure we get that posted too. We'll have this archived and have that information with it. You have a lot of friends here with you tonight who are expressing their how much they are glad to be able to see this. And is your mom on tonight as well?
So I was hoping my mom could join us. My mom is 98 and a half years old. I hope she's on. Hi, Mom. And if she wasn't able to join us live, then I will certainly make sure she watches this in the archives. And she's doing absolutely great. And she's a great light in her life. And hopefully, she'll also be able to join a live stream to watch her only grandson, my son Jack, graduate from William and Mary next week. So, shout out to Jack and Grandma and my sister. And that's a wonderful time for our family. So, thank you.
Oh, congratulations. And I'm going to award you the unofficial NMHS award for best background we've ever had on
Okay.
a seminar.
Thank you.
And, and so your studio is also a gallery in Mystic, right?
Yes, it is. I'm right on West Main Street. I'm here a lot, virtually every day, especially in the summer. And I'm always working on something. I welcome people to come in and see what I'm working on. It's a flight up the stairs. So if they're willing to walk up a flight of stairs to look at marine art, I'm more than welcome to more than happy to talk to them. So everybody out there, please do come by and say hello and let me know that you were with us tonight.
Well, I mean, if you're in Mystic, you know, your marine art is probably your wheelhouse. Just a couple last process questions, and maybe you said this, but is your painting oil or acrylic?
It is. It's oil on canvas. Thank you.
Okay.
Yep. And I work pretty exclusively nowadays in oil. And, I use a mixture of colors. I start with kind of a limited palette, and then I add some specialty or tertiary colors in. And this is a secret for you artists out there. I use cheap brushes because the brushes don't know that they're cheap. And, I use them, abuse them, and throw them away. And so that's my secret to keeping the cost down.
And what is I mean, what's the preference for oil? You just like how it handles better, or
Yeah,
do you
different
have,
colors.
yeah.
Winsor and Newton, I use a lot. And Gamblin colors I like. Gamblin, they have some really interesting colors that are sort of very unique in the way they mix. And right out of the tube, they're just lovely. So I kind of mix them in. And I mean, you can actually see a little bit of my workstation back here. It's kind of a mess. It's very small, but the light is good, and it's north light, and I just love the energy of being downtown Mystic.
Yeah.
And I do a
And
lot of commission work. I paint people's yachts and their families and their experiences, and so yeah, if you got anything that you might like to have done, I'd be happy to discuss it with you.
and we feature a lot of marine art and sea history. And I have to say, your depiction of people is really exceptional, and stands out and makes it special. So this is a
Thank
perfect
you.
commission for you.
Thank you, Kathy. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah. One last one. Did how was there a particular kind of finish that the commission needed you to do, or to have it in a public space like that?
Yeah, in fact, there was a whole process, um, of paperwork.
Mhm.
I transferred ownership of the piece. There was a very interesting and pretty long, detailed contract through the whole process, and then the ownership of it transferred from me to the committee. And during the dedication ceremony on April 21st, the Coast Guard Memorial Committee officially transferred ownership of it to the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. So that was pretty exciting. So it'll be there. It's going to be there for long after I'm gone, and
In perpetuity, as
in
Ken.
perpetuity. And I'm just so thrilled and honored to think about that. So hopefully my
And
grandkids will go look at it someday.
well, another last question here just came in. What happens to all the value sketches and the the color studies, and what happens to all that?
Yeah, so I have actually sold a couple of those, and I have a couple of more available, and that's it. I sold both of the black and white ones. I had a smaller one, which was 18 by 18, and then the larger one that I showed, 32 by 34, is now in a collection in California, and
Sure.
I believe that my collector is on this event tonight because he was particularly interested in the story of the painting, and so the largest and final color study is still available, and I'd be happy to talk to anybody about it if they're interested in it.
All
And then,
right.
of course, we
Well,
have reproductions. The posters are
yep.
inexpensive, and we have these kind of nice posters, which are frameable. And you go to your local art store or Michael's and get a 20 by 24 frame and put it on your wall.
All right. Well, I know what I'm going to be looking for Mother's Day this weekend.
There you go.
So again, Russ, thank you so much. This has been a fantastic presentation. And again, we try to have varied topics, and we're going to have a somewhat related topic next month. Our first Thursday seminar in June, that'll be taking place June 4th, is going to be with the winning artists from our Art of the Sea competition we do in conjunction with the American Society of Marine Artists. So it's a competition show and exhibition and sale that'll be going
Mhm.
on virtually all summer long, June and July at seahistory.org. We had nearly 300 entries this year, and 40 of those paintings will be a part of that exhibition, with the opportunity for you to take a piece home. Of course, this will benefit the artists as well as the National Maritime Historical Society. We'll have some of those winning artists as part of our series next time, as well as some of our asthma famous and favorite artists who are with us all the time. So, again, that's June 4th at 7 p.m. Thank you for coming. And Russ, thank you again. And thank you to all of our members and friends who are here tonight.
Yeah, I echo that too. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in, and hope you enjoyed it. And a big thanks to Cathy and all of her crew there.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a
Good
good
night.
evening.